Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Shanalee Sharboneau, awarded author as well as TV guest, radio show host, and model. But that's not the most important thing today. The thing that's most important today is we've got a very talented and multi-awarded, I think he's made my awards look like I don't know what I'm doing, by the name of Carlos Nicolas Flores. Welcome, Carlos. How are you?
Thank you. Very fine. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Sure. We're glad to have you. Thank you for doing this. Carlos has actually a Chicano essayist, a short story writer and a novelist. I'm just going to formally introduce him because he is so impressive. He is a winner of the Chicano Latino Literary Prize. He has written stories published in anthologies such as Cuantos Chicanos, Pieces of the Heart, North of the Rio Grande, The Mexican-American Experience, and others. In the book Our House on Hueco, a young adult novel published by Texas Tech University Press in 2006, was actually a finalist in the New Mexico Arizona Book Awards, as well as a silver winner in the Forward Book Award of the Year. In 2015, his last book, Sex as a Political Condition, is a satire of the cultural wars on the Mexican-American border, which we will cover, which Chicano novelist Manuel Ramos describes as quote-unquote outrageous, and was again published by the Texas Tech University. In 19 this year, his essay entitled Mexican Bandit and the Last Intellectual, Ian Stevens' notorious raid on the Chicano literary canon, will appear in the Stavins Unbound, The Critic Between Two Canons, done by Academic Press. As you can see, we are super thrilled you're here, Carlos, and want to start off by introducing you to the audience. Your last book, as we talked about, it really talks about kind of a fictional story, not even kind of, but a fictional story about activities on the border. Now, you live in Laredo, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. And how many miles would you say that's from the Mexico border?
It's right on the border. I can walk to the border right now in about 2-3 hours.
Wow. So just being respectful of views, because this isn't a political show, thank you, God, literally. My husband is actually, he grew up on the border as well. And I think people find it very interesting. They approach him, and I'm sure they approach you, especially as a writer that may have experiences that influence your writing. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like growing up right there in Mexico, especially with everybody making their own analogies on how life is on the border?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify. I was born in El Paso, Texas, and that's where I grew up. And I grew up in a largely Anglo-American part of the city. And however, I have relatives in Juarez, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, right across the border, where my mother was from. And that is in part what my first novel, my young adult novel, is about, really. Now, in 1970, then I was hired by Laredo Junior College at the time as an English instructor, and I've been here ever since. So, with the exception of 2 years. Now, 1 year, my wife and I spent it in New England. I got a fellowship to Dartmouth College. And another year we spent in Chula Puebla. So with the exception of 2 years, I've lived all my entire life, on the border. So what is that like? Well, at first it's confusing. Are we Americans, or are we Mexicans, or are we both, or what are we? And then there are, the brushes, the occasional brushes that I had with, racism or just plain ignorance, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there were a lot of other challenges, the huge contrast between Mexico, for example, third world country, and the United States, which continues to amaze me to this day. I mean, you drive through downtown El Paso, and you have a view of what is right across the river. I mean, and the contrast between the two countries is stark. Now, in Laredo, I've learned a lot. I actually, when I first arrived here, I had no intention of staying. Okay, I planned to leave the country. I was tired of a lot of stuff that was going on then in the 60s and 70s, and I wanted to become I don't know. Plus, I was bored by Texas, to be honest with you. I said, how dull this place is. So I want to become a European, or even a Mexican. Some place which is exciting. But what happened is this: that's not what fate had in store for me. Instead, I met this beautiful young woman, and that was it. I married her, my wife, and then she showed me that there was a whole side to the border that I really did not understand. History. My wife, for example, is descendant of one of the colonizing one of the families that colonized this area. With the arrival of the Spaniards, and they used to have ranches, but eventually all that was lost throughout a number of changes here on the border. So it's been very challenging. It's the other thing also about Laredo. It's interesting. It's about the next closest thing to not living in the United States, to be honest with you. I could spend the entire my life here never having to speak English if I didn't want to. Families are very close. In fact, Laredo and Nuevo Laredo are more closely connected, both geographically as well as culturally, I would say, than El Paso and Juarez, and probably any of the other bordered cities. And so there's a very close connection between the two. There are families that live on both sides. And I want to make one point about being a fronterizo, or a person from the border, and it's this. We're obligated to make a living, as you know. I mean, all of us, right? We all have to survive. And so what is our business here on the border? It's the border, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have basically what I see around me a lot is we have two obligations. One is to maintain the border. I mean, the fact, for example, that I teach English is part of maintaining that border. Okay, the Border Patrol is another one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then on the other hand, there's the other side, and that is part of our responsibility is to transgress it, and the transgression takes place in both directions, both north and south. And so we're caught in that tension between the two, obligations, speaking in terms of a nation, national obligations, but also economically. And so, and then of course, there are people that have been here even before the United States was established. Before it became part of the United States. My wife was part of that. So it's a very interesting mix in different ways.
It is. My husband always talks about, being raised in an environment where he was minority and had no issue with it, and I remember before Selena got real famous and popular, I had a good friend that got married and they were on the border as well. And I remembered how complimented I was when she invited me into the kitchen to teach una güera, a white girl, to cook. I mean, that was unheard of. I mean, it was unheard of if you got into the woman clique, but because they're such a tight-knit, lovely group, and family, it means everything to them, but much less to get in the kitchen. Boy, I took notes, and to this day, that's how I got my husband is through his stomach, by cooking those meals that I learned long ago. So, but yeah, no, it's very interesting, and I appreciate your insight on that. Your last book does talk about drug traffickers, and I know your books are fiction. We did talk about this. The book "Sex as a Political Condition," a border novel. Writers, we admit that our environment and our life influences our writing. Sometimes we hold it back, sometimes we push it through. I mean, did you ever see anything that made you creative, whether it was direct or indirect, and what type of experience, especially being in El Paso and Laredo? I mean, those are two very, and I've seen El Paso. You literally pass by, and on the hill you just see barrios, you see just slum, like you'd see on National Geographic, and it's like right there. So I think, like like people who live in the Midwest may not understand how people, live like that, like my husband lived, or like you were raised, etc. So is there anything influencing your writing when you're talking about the border?
Everything.
That's great.
Everything. Let me put it this way. Let me pay Laredo a compliment. Laredo is not an easy town to live in, by the way. We're 150 miles from, I guess, well, from America, really, in many ways, from San Antonio, if you call that America. We're 150 miles from the heart of Mexico and Monterrey as well. We're in the middle. We're very isolated. There are a lot of people from Laredo that never really go far, leave Laredo really, and don't travel far, and really don't know much other than the world that is here. So in many ways, we are, like Macondo, the city or the village in the heart of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and 100 Years of Solitude. We're on the margins of civilization, as one of my characters says. However, that very tension, the fact that I have to deal with a lot of the contradictions, the drug trafficking, the violence, just a lot of things, the racism in every direction. Mexicans are just as racist, can be just as racist towards each other as let's say whites can be towards Mexicans, or vice versa, or even blacks. It's a very interesting mix. I've often told some of my friends that I think that Mexicans are the most racist people on the face of the earth. Why? Well, because first of all, they make jokes about everybody else, as you will see in my novel. But number one, they're the most racist toward themselves, right? Most of my friends, many of who are Mexican, find that, of course, funny. Some people will not, but they agree. But anyway, so there's a huge, interesting mixture here. Now, so basically then, the language, for example, the humor in the novel, Sex is a Polluted Condition, that comes from the world in which I live. The sexism is there. The machismo is there. The slang that I use is there. A lot of jokes, let me tell you, by the way, some responses that I've had for some of my readers in Laredo, they said, "Thank you, this is us. This is really us."
That's great. That's awesome.
Whereas some of my white readers, especially some white female readers, they say, "Oh, this is terrible. I mean, this is horrible. This is this is a terrible book. But the fact of the matter is that my most faithful readers actually have been from Laredo. They recognize themselves. A man, and by the way, I was in El Paso this summer doing a workshop at the Tumble Words Writing Project, and these men came up to me and said, "You're writing about us. That's us."
Wow. Well, I really want to end on that note and take a break. Carlos, you've been extremely interesting, and we're going to follow up in this conversation. We are talking to the very talented and awarded Chicano essayist, Carlos Nicolas Flores.
What would you do if you had to put your life on hold to care for a loved one? I'm Charlotte Kenyon, award-winning author of the book, You Have to Laugh to Keep from Crying, How to Parent Your Parents. That was a question I had to ask myself some 16 years ago, and you'll have to ask the same question. I had a father-in-law with dementia, a mother with Alzheimer's, and a dad with Parkinson, all at the same time.
What would you do if you found out everyone on the town council were thieves and murderers? That's what happened in Bandera, Texas in 1873. John Cruder was the marshal, yet he needed to operate outside the law in order to balance the scales of justice. He is the Midnight Marauder. You can find his books on Amazon.com and TopWesterns.com in paperback, digital, and audio. I'm Roy Clinton, and I hope you'll read The Midnight Marauder.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
Good evening, y'all, and we are back. This is your radio show host, Shanalee Sharboneau, with the very talented and awarded Carlos Nicolas Flores. Welcome back, Carlos.
Thank you. We're great to be back.
So we were just, you were actually making me laugh, and here's why you were making me laugh, is the fact that, I was raised in a very household, and culture had its good and its bad points. And when you were talking about the machismo people, or the men recognizing that in themselves, it's funny because so many people will come up to me and they say, oh, the Irish drink. And it's like, yes, that's a good thing and a bad thing. And there's bad stories I have with that, and there's great stories I have with that. And that's a real thing for us. I mean, even to a point where how we get married, the bar has to be open because the luck passes across the bar. Every drink that goes, every celebration that goes for that couple, it is to them, and it is like good karma in this heightened sense. So I have to commend you for embracing the truth and the reality of the beauty of the Mexican culture. Me being raised in it in Texas, not as much as my husband, and loving it and understanding, and bringing it to people who, may want to see the good things and the bad things, as all cultures have, not just the Mexicanos or the Chicanos or whatever, right?
Right, I agree with you entirely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you're next.
No, by the way, have you been to Ireland?
Yes, I have been, and I'm going again for a family reunion next year. Very excited.
Great. I was there this summer, like I told you. I forget how many days I was in Ireland, but I made it a point to, I went to the gravesite of W.B. Yeats,
Wow.
okay? And then in Dublin, I went looking for James Joyce. And I ended up visiting two of the museums there dedicated to his work. And then I ended up going to, I think it's Marcello Tower, which is right outside of Dublin, which is the setting for the first chapter in Ulysses. And it was just an amazing experience. I fell in love with Ireland. Wow.
Yeah, I visited the Guinness plant.
Yes.
The Jameson plant. I'm going to have to take notes from you. So let me ask you this. That's a way to get in touch with the Irish culture. So let's say somebody's watching this and they're saying, I really do want to understand this. I'm tired of hearing everybody's opinion of what it's like to be Mexicano or Chicano or whatever. Where are things, maybe monuments or places that they can go to see, to have a more endearing understanding of, the culture, the border, Texas, and what have you? What would you recommend to people?
Well, I really don't know what to say. One of the things that I know that San Antonio, for example, has the Guadalupe Cultural Center, and they're doing some really important work in trying to preserve and recognize the Chicano Mexican American culture, and they have a lot of activities there that I've been going to. Now, the other place that I've been to is the Mexican American, I think, Cultural Center, MAC, in Austin. And that's another place that you might want to make contact with. Now, a number of these universities and colleges throughout Texas increasingly have Chicano study programs. So you might want to, contact them to find out, what they offer. I mean, a lot of the stuff is still very incipient. It's not where it could be. But I myself have to travel out of Laredo in order to stay in contact with what's going on with Chicanos, to be honest with you. Wow. Because for example, one of the projects that I was involved in a few years ago, and to a certain extent still am, is trying to establish a Institute of Chicano Mexican American or Chicano Studies in Laredo.
Wow.
Where we then, where we find, where we honor a number of writers from Laredo, or writing about the region, and so forth. So a lot of the stuff is still under construction, as it were.
So moving on to your last book, because I know you're working on a current book called The Pillars of Creation.
Right.
Let's get a little bit of a running start. Can you tell us about your last novel, Sex as a Political Condition, done in 2015?
Do you want to hear about Sex as a Political Condition?
Yeah. Let's hear a little bit about that, and then we'll go to the pillar.
All right. Let me go ahead and read the précis, or the summary of the book on the back of the cover. Okay, that's probably better, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, let me read it to you. Sex as a Political Condition, a border novel, is a raucous, hilarious journey through political dangers that come in all shapes, cup sizes, and sexual identities, a trip into the wild, sometimes outrageous world of the Texas-Mexico border and all geographical and anatomical points south. Honoré del Castillo runs the family curio shop in the backwater border town of Escandon, Texas, and fears dying in front of his TV like some six-pack Jose in his barrio. Encouraged by his friend Trotsky, he becomes politically active, smuggling refugees, airlifting guns to Mexico, and Mexican revolutionaries, negotiating with radical Chicana lesbians, but the naked truth he faces are more often naked than true and constantly threaten to unman him. When a convoy loaded with humanitarian aid bound for Nicaragua pulls into Escandon, his journey to becoming a true revolutionary hero begins. But not until both the convoy and Honoré's mortality and manhood are threatened in Guatemala does he finally confront the complications of his life and ultimately what it means to be a principled man in a screwed up world.
Sounds like a boring book. No, just kidding. That sounds super exciting. And it sounds like something you'd probably get through in about one night because you probably couldn't put it down, which, by the way, congratulations on the very good reviews about the book. You've definitely received some acclaim for it, and obviously for good reason. Now, with that said, how are you now working on the Pillars of Creation? What is this about? Why did you write it, and was it challenging for you?
Well, I had a very interesting experience, and I'm sure some of your writers or aspiring writers, have confronted, and it's this. One day I found myself in the middle of a 300-page manuscript, and I realized it was an absolute failure. I had to abandon it. So I said, okay, what am I going to do? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I had an idea, which I got from a friend of mine, Chicano poet Jose Flores, in which this couple is stoned on dope or pot, and they think they're clouds. And I remember, I don't know whether or not it was autobiographical or not, but I do know that he was trying to portray, a trip, on a head trip on pot, and did it very well. So I said, maybe I can work with that. So I started the experiment. So I started with that first scene, which is how the novel opens. And ultimately, it's about that couple, and they're coping with their very dangerous circumstances in South Texas, specifically in a colonia named Cuatro Vientos. Along with that, however, we have a number of other developments in that, we see some of the ugly things that the cartels are capable of. We see, some of the problems locally in terms of corruption. We see the ambivalence that Mexican Americans in the border suffer from. Are we American or Mexican, or what are we, et cetera, et cetera. So that is in part, but ultimately the theme of the book is, how does a young man, find God? He comes from a very religious family, and his father tells him, look, mijito, you are very smart, and he's very flattered. And he says, you're very smart, you have a lot of possibilities, but there's one thing you're not, and this worries me a lot, especially now that I'm on my deathbed, and that is, you're not a man of faith. You don't know what that is. And I'm afraid that unless you come to your senses and get off the pot and start doing what you're supposed to be doing and return to the religion, of your ancestors, you may be headed for trouble. Because I assure you that every man and woman has to go out into the desert and confront the devil.
Wow. Well, I want to end it there and take another break, because confronting the devil is always a cliffhanger. So we are talking to the very talented and awarded author, Carlos Nicolas Flores, and we'll be right back.
What started as a love letter to her son has become an international love letter for all parents to their children. Now you can read acclaimed author Shanalee Sharboneau's story to your children. When her son was very sick, she calmed him by singing her own song to him. She turned that song into the book, My Mama Loves Me, I'm Her Little Boy. She wrote 3 more magical books for all parents and kids 6 and under. Available at Indie Lecter, Amazon, and all local and national outlets.
Hello, I am the author and poet Denise Bryson. I am the author of The Things That Cross My Mind, Love's Reality, both in book and audio form. I am also noted as one of the best poets of 2011. I have 2 new projects coming up. One is the Blinky series, where Blinky tells us all about our coins and our bills for our children. I also have a book coming out called Say Ye. It's quotes from Denise Bryson, just inspirational and that will help you along the way.
Thank you for watching or listening to this show. Indie Lecter is proud to sponsor this programming. As a thank you for listening or watching, we would like to give you a 10% coupon code that you can use on our bookstore at indielecter.store. Use coupon code video19. Again, that's indielecter.store, coupon code video19 for a 10% discount on any purchase. Thank you.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow.
Good evening, y'all. We are back. This is your radio show host, Shanalee Sharboneau, and I am with the very talented author, Carlos Nicolas Flores. Welcome back, Carlos. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Wonderful. So we're talking about his latest release. When do you expect your book to be released here?
Hopefully in a year.
Wonderful. The Pillars of Creation. Are you close to finishing it?
Yes, I already finished it. I'm just polishing it.
Wonderful. So where are your books? Obviously, your previous books, the one we spoke of, Sex is a Political Condition, a border novel, The House on Hueco, and others. Where are those available for people to purchase, dear?
Those 2 books, by the way, are available on Amazon as well as, the Pillars, the Sex is a Political Condition is available at Texas Tech University Press. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I don't know where else. Now, Our House on Hueco, the 2nd edition, just came out like today. It was posted today. It was made available today.
Wow.
So that's available on the hard copy, at least. Kindle, not yet, on Amazon. Now, other books that those are the 2 books right now that are immediately available. And hopefully in about another year, there may be another 2 available. Not only The Pillars of Creation, but I'm thinking about publishing my first book, which was a collection of short stories I wrote when I was, in 1968, 69. And it's A Gang in the Seeds. And that probably will be available also on Amazon, hopefully in about a year. So I have 2 books coming up. And as you know, I told you I'm already working on a 4th one.
Yeah, so the work in progress, and I know it's taken in Jalisco, Mexico, by the name that you entitled it Cocula. Right. Am I saying that correctly? And I know you can't say much, but it's top secret. But can you give us a little bit of a teaser?
Okay, a young man rejected by a beautiful young woman. His heart is broken. And so one day he listens to this song by this mariachi named Jorge Negrete. It's a song from his mother's generation, Cocula, and he falls in love with it. And that pulls him out of his depression, his heartbreak, and then eventually he ends up, recovering as a result of that.
Wow. I think I need to get caught up and go 2 books back and then move forward. So are you making any appearances coming up, and maybe your website? Can you offer that?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say this. Right now, of course, I'm new to all this. I mean, to this business about websites and Facebook, etc. And so right now, I'm finally on Facebook. I've only been there, a couple of weeks. You can find me there. You can befriend me. In fact, if you're interested in my work, you could help me by helping me promote. That's one of the things I'm trying to do right now, just to have as extensive a reach as I can.
Sorry, honey. Sorry.
And so the other thing that I'll have is on September the 7th, I will be at the Dead Tree Bookstore in San Antonio from 2 to 4, reading from Sex is a Political Condition. My friend and colleague, Holly Dykstra, will be accompanying me in a discussion of the books, basically the theme of machismo versus feminism, by the way.
Oh.
On that. And then I'll be in Houston sometime in, I think it's October the 3rd, but I don't know if that's going to be open to the public. It's going to be at a college there, I think Lone Star College.
Wonderful. Well, if anybody wants to know if we do this show live, obviously the dog that's for sale is in the background, so I apologize for I've trained her to be a guard dog. But Carlos, it has been a joy. Thank you for giving everybody the insight to your life and living on the border. Again, Carlos Nicolas Flores, the author of Sex is a Political Condition, a border novel, and soon to be out, The Pillars of Creation and Kukula. Thank you so much, Carlos. You have a wonderful night, and y'all have a great night.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website at indiebeacon.com.